This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. All right, guys, we've got a special guest on the podcast today. His name is Scott Payne, a.k.a. Hillbilly Donnie Brasco. Okay, so he is a retired FBI special agent who spent 28 years in law enforcement investigating drug trafficking organizations, human traffickers, and domestic terrorists. But much of that work was done undercover. Okay, and that included him infiltrating neo-Nazi and white supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan and the Base, and also biker gangs like the Outlaws Motorcycle Club. And he is the author of a new book which details everything that I just talked about called Codename, Pale Horse, How I Went Undercover to Expose America's Nazis. And I joked with him off air because I get a lot of pitches. Okay, I get a lot of pitches for people to come on the show. And, I'll get probably 20 to 25 pitches of authors or documentarians or athletes or different people for every one that I bring on. Okay, just a bunch of people want to get on the show now, but not everything's a good fit. And it really doesn't take much for me to get rid of a pitch. But the pitch I got from his publisher, I was about halfway through reading it. And I was like, absolutely, this is going to be super interesting. And this was before I knew that this was a faith-based guy. But really in this conversation, we get into, why he got into law enforcement, how he got in the FBI, what kind of brought him to the undercover world. But we look at different misconceptions about what undercover work entails, how you get into it. But then we looked at some of the real life sketchiness that is that world and what happens if you do find yourself on the opposite end of a gun or someone telling you have to do this drug or I'm going to know you're a Fed. And so we get into all of that. But then we get into specifically, okay, what was it like being in the Fed, learning from people like Joe Pistone, Donnie Brasco, like that was one of his instructors. But then, okay, now we're going to infiltrate biker gangs. And he told this story in the podcast that was incredibly sketchy. It's in the book as well. But basically, he was taken down into a small basement and he thought he wasn't going to make it out. Okay. And he's got a recording device on him. And if they find that recording device, that could literally be curtains for him. But we talk about that. We talk about what is a 1%er and how that basically is, used in the biker community and things like that. But we spent some time there in the middle talking about, dude, you're a Christian, you're a Christ follower, you go to church when you're at home, but your job is lying, right? The way that he described it is build and betray. That's what undercover work is. You build relationships so that you can betray them, so that the people that are breaking the law can face justice. And how can you do that as a follower of Christ? But then we started talking about neo-Nazis, white supremacists. He actually joined the KKK at one point. So we talk about that story, but then we talk about accelerationists. So these are people that are not just like racial separatists. These are people that want the entire system to fall because they feel like that's the only way that the whites can be, elevated and different things like that. And we talk about kind of their super jacked up theology and all these types of things because they pretend to be Christians even though they're clearly not. But then we also talk a little bit toward the end about, okay, during the riots, the George Floyd riots, after, he died and overdosed in police custody, he talked about, okay, Antifa and BLM are killing people, burning buildings, taking over police precincts, causing $2 billion plus of damage. But then the Biden administration is like, hey, look over here. Well, it's white supremacists that we need to be worried about. We need to be worried about dorks in the woods of Alabama potentially getting together to write mean things on the walls of synagogues or on, schools that are predominantly black or something like that. And it just felt like a distraction tactic. So it was a very interesting answer to hear from him. But then at the end, I asked him hey, man, you put a lot of people away because of your undercover work. Some of these people are out now. Some of these people will be coming out. You're retired now, but you're a public guy. Your face is on your book. These people can easily find where you live. They know where you live. You talk about where you live and those different things. How do you maintain safety? How do you maintain this idea that, okay, me, my wife, my kids, my loved ones, that we're all safe? And so I really enjoyed his answer to that. So guys, I really enjoyed this interview today. I'm thrilled that we were able to pull it off for you, but I'm not going to keep him from you any longer. So without further ado, let's get into it. Scott Payne, welcome to Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, buddy, I think we hit it off air, and so now we just have to carry that momentum on into the interview because you did a little bit of research on us, and you said you're following us now. So I don't know if that's a good thing because you used to be an FBI agent. Is that I'm following you because I'm on some sort of secret list, or you're following us because you like the content?
I'm following you because I like the content, and hey, FBI could be following me right now. Who knows?
Hey, you know what? I think I made my way on a couple of different lists, but it's funny because I was telling you off air, and I mentioned it in the introduction. This was one of the quickest, yes, I will have this guy on the show of my entire career, because as you know, as time has gone on, it's like, okay, I would bring on one pitch for every 5 pitches I would get, Now it's like 20 or 25. I get pitched 20 or 25 different people to come on the show for every one that I bring on. This one was like, boom, snap, let's get this guy on here. Interesting background. And then reading the book was obviously fantastic. But let's start small and then we'll ease our way into your career. What was it like growing up, Scott Payne?
Not bad. I was an 80s guy, so high school in the late 80s was pretty cool. But no, I grew up in a Christian home. My parents, well, actually both of my grandfathers were pastors. What a little claim to fame for my mom's side of the family, the Kelly family, is my grandfather got a shout out on the Gaither show one time. They were like, "Hey, we were up in a tent revival, and pastor, and I was like, oh man, that's my grandpa, But I grew up like that, and musical family, very musical. Went and sang at churches, helped open churches, stuff like that. My first 7 years of school, I went to a Christian private school, Washington Avenue Christian School in Greenville, South Carolina. And then around 8th grade, I went into public school, and there's been quite a few bumps in the road, but it's my faith that's always taken care of me. I mean, I've strayed and done some pretty dumb things, and as I like to say, the Lord laid the smackdown on me, and I I got humbled very quickly. So but that, growing up playing sports, probably started playing music around 7th grade, and to this day. At 54 years old, me and my high school friends, our close-knit group, there's probably like 8 of us, we are all still super tight.
Well, that's pretty unique. I mean, when you see a guy basically in their 30s that still has friends, that's shocking, much less as you get older and grow, especially if you go all the way back to high school. So and we'll get more into your faith, because that has a lot of through points into the work that you did. But eventually you were drawn towards law enforcement, but that can take many forms. And you were drawn specifically towards the federal law enforcement, to the FBI. So I know we're kind of speeding into your story that, it takes a lot longer to get there. But I guess what drew you to law enforcement, and then why not law enforcement on the local level? Why the Fed?
I actually was a local cop. I started at the sheriff's office in Greenville County Sheriff's Office in South Carolina. Man, you do this whole dive into a book writing thing and going back and looking at your life stuff. Some of it's pretty clear. You're like, man, I've always kind of been an underdog guy. I always had that kind of shepherd mentality, that livestock guardian dog, if you will. Yeah. Bully of bullies. Not saying I didn't bully, and I'm not proud of it when I did, but for the most part, I just remember being like a bully of bullies. I get to college playing football, but I really just went to college so I'd have 4 more years to figure out what I was going to do with my life. Yeah. And while I was there, I came across, and I became a bouncer as well, which, I mean, it's not it's a pretty seedy environment, some of the places I worked. But I came across an elective that was law enforcement and criminal justice, and I just really liked it. And then the more I got into it, went on some ride-alongs with cops, and I was a deputy sheriff for 5 years, so uniform patrol 3, and then 2 I was in vice. My last 2 I was a vice and narcotics investigator. So now I'm already starting to get into that dope game, undercover game. You get certified at the state level, and I guess I guess in my mind, I always pictured it going federal. I didn't remember that, but I found a note. I found a note in one of my old books. It's like, I'm going to be in the feds in 5 years. And I'm like, I don't even remember writing that. But generally speaking, at that point in my life, you're looking at where you're going to be in 5 years in law enforcement. Because at my sheriff's office, like many, you don't get those raises every year. The county council gives themselves raises, but not the cops. And it got to a point to where I could have literally, at 5 years in, I could have stepped out and came back in as a guy with a 4-year degree, and I would make as much, if not more money than I was making as a 5-year deputy. So, but I applied with the FBI, and I never got a chance to fill out any other federal agencies. And the rest is history, as they say.
Rest is history. You had a multiple decade career doing that, and we'll get into that work. But sometimes when we get into discussions, I mean, I talk to people that are like, country music stars or athletes or authors or things like that. There's always misconceptions about what it is that people do and what the work looks like. Working for the FBI, what are some of the common misconceptions, because we live in this, TV and movie culture where everything is super dramatized? Before we get into the undercover stuff, just working for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, what are common misconceptions?
Well, there's plenty, but I love it when you go and you're watching a TV show or a movie and they're like, I need HRT here in 30 minutes. And you're like, nah, I don't know about no 30 minutes unless we're right around Quantico, or, I need to go up on this phone right now. And you're like, man, a Title III wiretap? I mean, we're talking 50, 80 page affidavits. You got to walk it through. It's got to get, a slew of approvals. And then you finally get up on the phone if you've got the right number. And within 15 days, you have to do a 15-day report. And in another 15 days, you got to re-up or take it down. So it's there's a lot of misconceptions like that. But I will say the TV's gotten better. The 80s, everybody's got their finger on the trigger. Everybody's muzzling everybody. It's just terrible tactics. And now there's enough consultants out there that they're looking pretty real.
Yeah, the funny thing is, it's hard for me because I was born in '86, and so I didn't grow up watching those '80s action movies, right? I have to go back and watch them now, and they're just terrible because like the UFC is a thing now, so we know all those roundhouse kicks are not like a real thing. People aren't flying through windows when they get teeped or things like that. So it is kind of interesting how things have evolved. Okay, but so now you're in the Fed, you're doing that type of work, but you are, I guess you were being summoned, but you also felt personally called to doing some undercover work. And I you can tell us kind of what does that look like? Do you just raise your hand and be like, I would like to go undercover, please? Or are you kind of like identified by the Bureau? And let's kind of keep the common misconceptions thing going. What are some of the common misconceptions about, okay, I'm doing undercover work, but what does that entail?
Okay, well, let me start with the only thing you're required to be when you are hired as an FBI agent is to be a case agent. If you take on collateral duties, which I was like, I did a ton of collateral duties, but I was a case agent first. So undercover program is voluntary. I wouldn't necessarily say that people came looking for me because I was trying to get into the program. The FBI certification process is very extensive. Not knocking any other federal agencies. I've got friends in all of them. But there are a lot of blocks to get checked, and we actually, just to get a slot in our certification school is very tough. And if you get that slot, you got a 2-week certification process, no days off, huge on sleep deprivation, lots of scenarios, lots of training, drinking from a fire hydrant. And it breaks a lot of people. I've seen, I got certified in 2002 as a FBI undercover. I started probably role playing at the school in 2003, and I only missed a handful of schools for the rest of my career. And I had never seen 100% graduation rate. And it's not hazing. It's not nothing like that. It's just that some people, you can be the best case agent in the world, but maybe you're not cut out for undercover. You can be the best SWAT operator in the world. I've had friends that I was on SWAT with that were squared away dudes. And I've seen them in action and everything's cool. And then they go to an undercover school to try to get certified. And after about 3 or 4 days with no sleep, they look like they've been molested by a tribe. I mean, they come walking in, their hair's disheveled, buttons don't match on their shirt, zippers undone. And you're like, man, are you okay? And some people just can't take that normal, like if I'm working regular hours this week, my regimen is going to be the same, most likely, right? I'm going to get up about the same time every day, work out about the same time every day, eat about the same time every day. But can you take that, flip it sideways, upside down, and not get your square meals, miss your workouts for several days, if not weeks, and it not screw you up mentally and have an adverse impact on your psyche? Now, to your other question, the undercover. Here, I just got through teaching to Monday. I was in Sandestin, Florida, teaching at a gang and narcotics conference. And I'll ask, hey, what do you think undercover is? What's undercover to you? And you walk around and people are like, oh, it's acting. Or somebody's like, oh, you're lying. Or you're pretending to be something you're not. You're taking on a persona so you can infiltrate a group and get information. That's all pretty good. But in the undercover world, we build and betray. And it sucks if you look at it that way, but we are building relationships that if you're doing criminal activity and we're gathering evidence of it, we're going to be betraying that friendship.
One of the most interesting things about the book, again, the book is Codename Pale Horse. Fantastic book, guys. It's in the show notes. You should definitely check it out. It is out now if you're listening to this on time. Is you built such good relationships doing your undercover work that even after you busted people, they'd be like, hey, man, I know you're just doing your job. Still love you, bro. Like, that was one of the parts of the book I was like shocked. Like, these people are going to federal prison and they're like, but I can't hold it against Scott. Scott's my boy. And so, like, that's kind of an ode to kind of what you do. But I guess once guys get into the undercover thing, so they pass, they get through the program, they are undercover. What are some of the mistakes? What are some of the mistakes that agents make when they're working undercover that could maybe bounce them out of the program, or just that? I guess, how risky does it actually get? Because again, this over, dramatized TV culture, we're always thinking the undercover guy is literally basically about to get shot in every scene. Like, oh my gosh, he accidentally said his real name and he couldn't really get out of it. And so, like, those are the things that we think guys do, is like they kind of mess up themselves, or maybe they speak too much, or they kind of go over the top. But what are some of those mistakes that those guys make?
Well, there's a decent amount. I've made plenty of mistakes. There's actually policy in the FBI undercover operations manual that I had a lot to do with, because it wasn't a policy. And when they were like, hey, what are the rules on that? I'm like, well, there aren't any. And then they revamped the orders, the policy guide, and it says, under subsection adverse impacts or whatever, adverse events. But some of the things, like even at the school, some of the ones that I remember specifically are, if you can't tell the situation is deteriorating. We've had some unbelievable former special forces, whatever, trying to get into the undercover program. But just say, for instance, if they've been overseas and they've seen some horrific stuff and put bodies back together, or seen people blown to bits, they're so desensitized sometimes that when they're doing a scenario at an undercover school and your source has died, you've done dope, this is all hypothetical in a scenario, but they're still in it because they don't realize, hey, there's no case worth this. You got to get out. Or, you just can't see that you're doing things that things around you are getting bad. I had some instances like that happened to me, and the situation was definitely deteriorating. And in my mind, you're playing chess. You're trying to be 4 or 5 moves ahead of the target or whoever you're dealing with. And I fell behind in the moves on that one because I ended up in a tight spot. But I don't know. It's you see the situation deteriorating. But as soon as I passed this test they were trying to give me, everything went, whoosh, it was fine. It was like, now you got to pay attention to that. And I articulated that. I'm like, look, yeah, it was bad. But then as soon as I faked this test, it was like, all right, hey, man, everything's cool. Come on in the back. Here's all the dope. My brother's a cop, blah, 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 and you're doing all this stuff. You can make a lot of mistakes. Generally speaking, just coming from the narcotics world, even back in the mid-'90s when I was a vice narcotics investigator at the sheriff's office, you got that black cloud over you. You got dope, you got money, and you got women. Or whatever the vice may be. It could be the opposite way, but that's generally that black cloud. And you see people, sadly, make mistakes. But in the undercover world, let me say this. If you are pretending to be something that you are not, like this really different than what you are for a long period of time, like deep cover, generally one or two things is going to happen. You're either going to slip up because it's not really you, and then you might be getting caught by the bad guys, or you're going to become it. And neither one of them are good. But to your question on like danger and yeah, it's there. It depends on who you work. It depends on your case. But the way I was taught and what I've learned through my 28 years in law enforcement, and then I'm still doing stuff with them, even though I'm retired. But trying to think. What you said, what was it you asked me there at the end?
Well, basically, it's the mistakes that people make, but what some agents do. That's, I guess, how risky is it for certain people in certain situations.
I'm
Because
sorry.
here in the book, you talk about two critical skills of keeping undercover work legal. Okay, the first thing is like, okay, you can't entrap anybody. Or I guess that was the second thing is don't entrap anybody,
Yeah.
right? Because if you infiltrate or if you initiate a criminal plot, that's entrapment, but also never be violent unless it's self-defense. And I just think of a real life scenario where it's like, hey, you better be violent towards this person, or you better hurt this person, or we're going to hurt you. And in that moment, it's like, what in the world do you do? And it's like, how realistic and how often are guys really being caught in situations like that, where it's like, when even like you, it's like, hey, you're going to do this drug, or I'm going to shoot you. Those types of things.
Yeah. Thanks for getting me back on track.
Yeah.
I'm on my first cup of coffee, so.
Oh, it's all good, man. We got plenty of time.
I know, right? There's always a propensity for violence. It doesn't matter really what you work. So you never want to get lax anyway in law enforcement. But let's just say my skill set led me to backwoods with toothless meth heads, drug addicts, violent biker gangs, white supremacy groups. But I've got plenty of peers and mentors and people I've been blessed to mentor that maybe their skill set is some huge white collar case. Maybe it's a Wall Street fraud type thing, or maybe they're doing art crime. And they're not necessarily going into the woods with a bunch of armed, crazed people, but they might be doing a cheese and wine thing. Yeah. But there's still a propensity for violence. If somebody's going to go to jail, generally, a lot of times you're more worried about the white collar person than the gangbanger who's used to the system. They may fight a lot, but once the cuffs are on, it's like, all right, man. They know it's just like the game. But say it's a person, a bank manager or something that's been embezzling. When that first cuff goes on, they're like, oh man, this is real. I'm not going to do good in prison. Or a pedophile. You got crimes against children people. And that's a huge sickness in itself, but they don't do well in prison. So, there's always a propensity for violence. So it doesn't matter for me, if you're asking me the question, it doesn't matter whether it's a white collar crime, whether it's a hardcore drug gang, it's always a propensity for violence.
Well, I think it's interesting. One thing you were saying on an earlier question is it seems like guys are grasping too much onto the case that they can't just let it go. I rewatched Heat here recently, one of the best movies ever. Mm-hmm. And as a crime movie, the main character, De Niro, one of the main characters, he basically talks about you've got to be able to walk away from any situation in 30 seconds flat. That's walk away from people, walk away from situations. You've got to be able to let go. So you technically hold everything loosely, and it seems like the agents that really get in trouble are the ones that hold on tightly with both hands. And I guess another thing that you mentioned there that's interesting that I wanted to ask you about is switching. Whether you're in deep cover or just doing undercover, it's switching back and forth, because all the while you're doing this undercover stuff, and guys, we haven't even got into the undercover stuff that you were doing, and don't worry, we're going to get there. You're married. You've got kids. Uh-huh. And, there's one misconception that you're like living that second life, like you're gone for years at a time, living this double life or something like that. That's not exactly the case. But how hard is it when that line between Scott Payne and whatever the name is that you've taken on and whatever group that you're infiltrating, how hard is it to switch back and forth and realize like, no, I'm not becoming this bad person. I'm just basically playing a role so that I can build and betray?
Very good question. I think in the beginning it was a lot harder, but as the years went on, especially towards the end of my career, you just know. But maybe the best way for me to answer it is this. For me, the way I was taught and the way I did it is I was never far from what I really am, who I really am. I mean, I'm still the jovial country guy. I'm the boisterous, big splash, whatever. I may or may not have kids. I may or may not be married. I may or may not have played college ball. May or may not be a musician, but you can pretty much bet I lift weights and I probably ride motorcycles. But for me, I mean, I pull from within, right? So if I'm with a violent biker gang, I mean, for the most part, I had a good time because it was just like being back on the football team, and just cracking skulls and doing whatever, a bunch of dumb testosterone stuff. But one of the main things I would do is I always have my necklace and I got my cross, right? But when I would go get ready to go undercover, the cross comes off and I had a skull and I put the skull on. And that, I don't know, maybe that's me putting on my Superman cape or whatever, but you just start making that transition because literally, and things are getting tougher these days, way tougher with like facial recognition and all this stuff. But in my heyday, once I got out of my vehicle at the airport of wherever I was living, I'm Scott Calloway now, or I'm Scott Anderson now, or I'm Scott Williams, and there's nothing on me that says anything different. And you know your social, you know your date of birth, you know where high school you went to, you got to know it all because you have to look as real as you can.
Hey guys, real quick. As you've heard me describe before, I am incredibly conservative about the supplements that I take. I spent years being terrified of putting different products in my body because I didn't know what they were made with or if it was going to be kind of fly-by-night companies using all kinds of crazy ingredients. So I've always wanted to partner with an American company that only uses the highest quality ingredients, and that's why I want to remind you that we are partnered with Jocko Fuel. Jocko Fuel is Jocko Willing's supplement company that is based here in the United States. So what are some of my favorite products that they make? So they make whey protein powder, and guys, they just released a cookies and cream flavor not that long ago, and it is ridiculously good. Make sure you use it with milk. It makes it even better. They also make clean energy drinks. I finally decided what my favorite was, and that's pink lemonade. That is my favorite of all their flavors. But they also have the best tasting greens powder on the market. I prefer the peach flavor myself. They also make pre-workout and ready-to-drink protein. So I actually mix the ready-to-drink protein in my boys' milk, and they love it. They're constantly like, Dad, banana milk, banana milk. So we got to hook that up in the Thompson household. But I also use their krill oil, fish oil, creatine, vitamin D, and their sleep aids. And guys, they've got new stuff coming out all the time and a bunch of stuff I didn't even have time to mention. Guys, if you take your health and wellness seriously, then you simply can't afford to put cheap and inconsistent supplements inside of your body. Try Origin out today by going to www.jockofuel.com. That's jockofuel.com. Use the promo code Undaunted to get 10% off your order. Again, that's jockofuel.com, promo code Undaunted to get 10% off your order. I mean, that's obviously your life is on the line because as you described, no matter if it's white collar, blue collar, crazy people in the woods, drinking goat blood, don't worry guys, we'll get there. There's always that, there's danger around every corner. And if you slip up, you could get got. One question before we start getting into the actual undercover work. You worked with the actual real life Donnie Brasco. Right.
Absolutely.
And so that's second movie reference, but that's technically a real thing and a real person that actually happened. But it was just so interesting as you're talking about the real world guy, the alter ego was Donnie Brasco, but he was still at the Bureau after, he had basically gone world famous for being this person that infiltrated the mob and different things like that. So for you, what was it like getting into the world? Okay, you're a Fed now. Okay, now you're an undercover guy. Oh, shoot, we're learning from the guy. Like the I guess you could call him the most famous of guys that have done this line of work. But here he is teaching you the ins and outs of doing this job so that you could do well in your chosen field or wherever you're sent to.
I would be like an unhealthy kid in a candy store.
That's right.
I actually was on the front row. That's not my choice. Again, the undercover school is 20 slots. So you got 4 groups of 5. And my group, we were on the front row. And here I am, a guy who's fascinated with undercover. Already have the bug because I did undercover work, not like super deep, but, buying dope and doing vice stuff. At the sheriff's office, and now I'm the middle seat of the front row, and I've got Donnie Brasco. I got Joe Pistone talking to me, and he's still a friend to this day. I mean, he's a mentor for sure. I mean, but he graciously did a blurb on the book as well. He is anytime he comes around. I think I saw him. I mean, within the last year, I saw him because he was in town speaking at a conference, and he hit me up. My nickname was Big Country. And he's like, "Hey, Country, I'm coming to, Tennessee." And I'm like, "I'm on my way, drop what you're doing." But yeah, but Joe's probably the most famous. But there are so many that you don't know. And that's a very good lead for me to say this, because there's going to be haters and there's going to be people out there that like, "Oh, you just like to talk about yourself." And okay, that's fine. That's not the truth, but that's okay. There are men and women out there that have done way more than me, that have been in more harrowing situations than me. And I don't want anybody to have to go through anything harrowing or something scary, but if we're on the front line and we're still doing undercover, it's probably going to happen. But you got Joe Pistone, but then you meet these other people, and then you get involved deeply in the program, and you've got this cadre. And I've been a part of a lot of units, SWAT teams, narcotics units, whatever it may be. The undercover program during, again, like that 15 to 20 year period that in the FBI, that was the most diverse group of people I've ever been a part of.
Well, and the interesting thing is I've had the wonderful privilege of being around a lot of people from the Spec Ops community. So these could be Navy SEALs or Marine Recon or SF or these different guys. And so they're the guys that have the big followings on Instagram. And I like those guys and I'm friends with those guys. But then when you're just hanging out, having a scotch and a cigar and all that, and then you start hearing stories about guys and they'll only refer to them by their code name and because they'll be like, yeah, I got a bunch of followers on Instagram, but this dude was the man, but he's, quiet professional. Yep. He doesn't want to be acknowledged for anything. And then you start hearing about, okay, well, the public thinks that this guy killed that guy, but actually it was this guy and he just didn't want any, he didn't want any play. And so he's like, yeah, let's just say the other guy killed him. It's just an interesting group of people. All right. We've made it. Yeah, we made it all the way here, Scott. We need to start talking about some of your undercover stuff that you actually did. And I've spent a lot of time watching gangland shows, okay? And so that's actually helped me quite a bit. So you and I are talking a little bit because I've watched all these biker gang shows, and I don't mean like Sons of Anarchy. I mean like documentaries, about these different groups and these different gangs. Like I recognize tattoos on people. Like I had this interaction with a guy in New Mexico at a gas pump. I'll make the long story short. The moment he started talking to me, I knew that he was clicked up, that he had been in prison, and I was pretty sure what he was in prison for. And throughout our conversation, as I was sharing the gospel with him, yep, he was clicked up. I had the right click. He was in prison, and he was in prison for what I thought he was in prison for, and he had just gotten out just because I had watched these shows. And so, guys, you think, hey, this is just my hobby, but you should always be thinking how my hobby could turn into a gospel-related conversation where you're actually making, you're making common ground with somebody like that. But one of the first things that you got into is you were put on to biker gangs. And there are things where people will see patches on guys' cuts or things like that say 1%er. And they don't exactly know what that means. But let's talk a little bit about biker gangs. You get kind of getting into that world, 1%ers, and then how you were turned on to trying to infiltrate Outlaw Motorcycle Club.
Sure. I kind of was a biker. I mean, that's my old narcotics squad. I mean, if you saw a picture of us, we looked like we were a biker gang pretty much. I mean, we all rode Harleys and we'd go to Myrtle Beach Bike Week every year or twice a year usually. But, and where I was at, South Carolina, was a Hells Angels state and it still is. But, so when I bounced in, I bounced in, I'm not proud of it. I bounced in gentlemen's clubs, which in the book I say is an oxymoron because anytime I've ever been in those places, there's not a single gentleman in there. Yeah. But when I was doing that, the Hells Angels came there a lot. So I was getting all kinds of exposure like that. And then for the people or listeners that don't know, the biker world, there's, you've got what you've already said, the cut, the colors, that's their vest. You'll have a top rocker. It'll say like, Outlaws MC, and then there'll be their patch, which usually has a nickname or whatever. And then you got a bottom rocker, which might be like the state, Massachusetts. And then if you see the 1%er, that goes way back to when, all these motorcycle gangs were being formed from guys coming back from war. And it was a rowdy, raucous bunch. And the owner, or I guess the lead guy of the American Motorcycle Association, I think is what it was back then, came out with a statement. It says something to the effect of, look, 99% of all motorcycle riders are good, law-abiding citizens. It's only 1% of they're bad. And they took that as a badge of honor, smacked it on their chest, and they're 1%ers. They also have a mandatory, most clubs have a mandatory meeting every week, and they refer to that as church. So when we start talking about the Outlaws, and I say we were going to church, I don't mean church. I mean the weekly meeting. So the way it happened for me is I get certified. I'm doing undercovers, but I'm going back and role playing at the school. So I'm starting to get noticed by some people that are longer in the tooth and undercover and very involved in the program. And they might see me, and I don't know. I was blessed that they thought I had something, and they would say, "Hey, man, we got this case coming up. What do you think? Would you be interested in it?" And I ended up going up to Boston, Massachusetts to be interviewed for the Outlaws case. And eventually, I guess, I don't know how many they interviewed or whatever, but I got picked. And then the game starts. Now it's how do we approach? How do I get in? What's a redneck doing in Massachusetts kind of thing, and then that's how the case agent, the case team had been working the Outlaws, I think, on that case for at least a year. And now they've gotten to the point to where, hey, they've got all this intelligence. They've got some crimes, but they know there's more there. And they're at the point where they can try to insert an undercover. And that ended up being me.
So insert an undercover, but let's really get into the granular level of how do you even get started? Because obviously you don't just walk up to one of their church services and be like, hey, I'm a guy, I ride bicycles with motors on them. Do y'all want to hang out with me? Like, those things don't happen. And so I'm sure there is kind of tradecraft that you can't share about how you would insert into a situation like that. But I mean, infiltration doesn't happen without an introduction. So how in the world do you get introduced?
There are many different ways, and there is some tradecraft I won't talk about. But for me in this case, I decided with the team, the case team, that it'd be best. I felt most comfortable if I went in and what we call like a cold bump. Another, I'm bumping into you. I've never met you. I'm not being introduced to you. And what I did for that particular case is I was just being me, loudmouth, country guy at a Northeast bar, strip club, because we knew that's where they frequented, one of the clubs that they frequented in Brockton, Massachusetts. So I went in there a couple of times on my own, kind of got the lay of the land. And then I was in there one night when we decided, hey, tonight's going to be our first try. And they were leaving church at their clubhouse, and they all came to this place called the Foxy Lady. And I was in there and I'm just being me, but I've already got a group of people around telling jokes, laughing, we're drinking. And there was one, you're attracting attention, right?
Sure.
And all these outlaws are on this other side of the bar, got the back corner. And one of them, he was like, hey man, where are you from? And this, that, and the other. And then we start talking, and eventually, it's just ingratiating, gaining trust, building those relationships and a friendship. And maybe you find out they're doing something illegal. Maybe you don't. I've done a lot of undercovers where you're in there for 5 months and there's nothing criminally being done, and it's just time to pull chocks.
Yeah, and so with that in mind, again, guys, I don't want to spoil any of the amazing stories that come from the book. Again, it's Codename Pale Horse. You got to go check it out. But, we've been talking for like 30 minutes. We're basically best friends now. I want a story from the Outlaw Motorcycle Club time period that you didn't tell in the book. I want to know a good one. Doesn't have to be super juicy. It could just be interesting or funny because, again, guys, no spoiler alert here. Your work that you did brought down a lot of the guys that were in that club. You talk about it in the book. But give me something. Give me something good. Give me something. Come on.
See, that's a great thing, but I'm so daggum transparent. I think I put everything in the book. I'm trying to
everything. Think. There's not like one like kind of funny story or kind of interesting thing that you didn't expect. It's got to be something.
Man, I think I put it in there.
Okay, well, how about you just give us a story from the book without spoiling anything? Because obviously, you get into the detail.
Yeah, we can talk about it. Well, one of the scariest things that ever happened to me happened on that case.
Let's go.
And this will be good for this specific. I can't talk specifically this podcast in your listener group because we're faith based, right? Mm-hmm. I had been undercover for a year and a half with these guys, and we were doing all kinds of criminal activity because they had learned that what they believed is that I was a high-ranking member of an international theft ring. I was based out of South Texas, deep South Texas, on the border, and I was moving stolen stuff to the cartel, which really happened all the time. So they started reporting vehicles stolen, and then they would sell them to me at a stolen price. They get their insurance money, all kind of light stuff, but I'm gaining trust. And, in the criminal world, greed generally wins all the time. Yep. Everybody's favorite color is green. They want money. And so for a year and a half, we've been gathering all kinds of evidence of criminal activity, whether it be stolen vehicles, because then they eventually just started stealing them right off the lot out of people, carjackings where they've taken somebody at gunpoint and they're getting me to get rid of the vehicle. There were murders that were happening. All kinds of stuff was going on, but we're at a 1.5 point. And I've got really good relationships. And if you look at, I'm Scott Calloway, but if you look at who my closest friendships were, there was a guy named Scott Town. We were the tightest. Scary how tight we were. Scary how much we had in common. And then the second probably tightest relationship would have been a guy that went by the street named Clothesline, and he was an enforcer for the Outlaws. So let's get to that point. It's now a 1.5 years in, and the case team, the FBI, decided we wanted to try to do a drug protection because they had been, when I met the president of the Taunton chapter, Joe Dogs, as soon as I said I was in McAllen, Texas, first thing out of his mouth was, "How much can you get a kilo of cocaine for down there?" I'm like, well, all
right.
I'm like, if anybody was wondering and we needed predication, we now have it. So now I've let it trickle out after a 1.5 years. Hey, I did used to be involved in the dope game. We've got cartels trying to move dope into Canada. And they were always, especially Joe Dogs, was looking, hey man, they're always looking for a lower price for the drug and a higher purity of the drug. And it was a good chance for them to meet and get a connection to a strong pipeline of narcotics. So here we are at a 1.5 years. The assistant United States attorney, which is the person assigned from the U.S. attorney's office on the case, they're working the case, and he said, "Hey man, because we're preparing to do this drug protection," and he's like, "Are they talking about that in the clubhouse?" And I'm like, "Yeah, all the time." And he's like, "Well, it would be great if we could get that on a recording in the clubhouse because it helps with asset forfeiture and search warrants and stuff like that." And of course, I said, "Yeah, I'll do it because that's what we're doing. You're on the front line. You're going in there and you're getting the evidence." And again, a 1.5 years. I don't want to say I got lax, but Joe Dog says, "Hey, come over here, meet us at the clubhouse." This is the night before we're supposed to do the deal. I get there. They're still having church. I'm knocking on the door. Joe Dogs finally cracks the door and peeks through it. And it's like, "Hey, we're not ready yet." And I was kind of a smart aleck. I'm like, "Well, then why did you tell me to come over here?" So he sends me with another guy to go get something to eat. We come back. What I didn't know, and what we found out later, is that the Outlaws in Massachusetts there, clearly somebody had to send it up the chain because it came down from the top, which the national president at that time was a guy that went by Milwaukee Jack. And they said, "Hey, has this guy," talking about me, "really been checked out?" And the response was, we found out, "Hey, we've done like 8+ jobs with this guy and we're not in bracelets, meaning handcuffs." And they said, "It doesn't matter. We want you to check him." So we didn't know it. I didn't know it, but we found out what their kind of MO was for checking people out that night. I go in, and granted, I'm wired to the hilt. I have a audio recording device. I have an audio recording device. I've got a transmitter, and I go into the clubhouse and I'm cracking jokes like normal. So for the listeners that don't know, at least at this chapter, the way it worked was if you're not a patch member, you can't touch the door. Right. And the door of that clubhouse had a metal bar, welded hooks, whatever. The big steel bar across it, steel frame, deadbolts, heavily fortified door. You can't touch the phone. But I could drink for free because they respected me and they liked me. So we're there, and it comes to the point to where Clothesline comes up to me, and he says, "Hey, Tex," they call me Tex. That was my road name because I was from Texas, and they, you can't pick your nickname. They pick it for you. So he's like, "Hey, Tex, you got a minute?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's supposed to be my boy." And he takes me to this one door that I'd never been in the clubhouse. I'd been in that clubhouse probably 20+ times. I'd never been in this door. Didn't know where he even went. Opens the door. As he's walking in front of me, another outlaw comes in behind me, which of course your spidey senses or the Holy Spirit should be telling you, "Hey, this is not good." So we walk down into this very tight, dark stairwell. You could call it a basement. More like a cellar. It's a northeastern home. I couldn't even stand. I'm 6'4", but I couldn't stand up straight. It was that tight. You probably touched the wall on both sides. So now you're starting to get that "oh crap" moment. And I did look for plastic. I saw a rope. They'd already brandished their weapons. They're showing me they got guns, basically telling me you're not free to go. The one outlaw that came in behind me is standing on the steps to keep me from leaving. And he strip searched me. He tells me to write down my full name, my date of birth, phone number, wife and kids. Actually, he said, I'm not going to tell you to write your kids' names down. He said, not like we couldn't find out who they are. And they start checking me for a wire. But because of that adrenaline dump and that oh crap moment, if anybody's ever had it, like if you've ever been in a car wreck, things just slow down, right? So It feels like it's 10 minutes. It might only been 30 seconds, or minutes seem like hours. You get auditory exclusion. Everything's going whoosh, whoosh, real slow. Time dilation. Your eyes are clicking like frames. You're like, oh, you can feel your heart beating. Your hamstrings get rubbery, all that stuff. I forgot my middle name. I'm trying to write down my name. And as I told you earlier, I know who it is. It's me. I created this thing. But because of the stress and me knowing what could potentially get ready to happen, I forgot my middle name. And then I'm going through the Rolodex in my head. I'm doing distraction techniques, keeping talking to them, trying to figure out what's going on. And I took off my jacket. I took off whatever, how many layers of shirts I had on. I don't know. It was cold. I took my boots off, and then I pulled my pants and underwear down around my ankles. So I'm standing there naked pretty much. And they check me out, and he doesn't find anything. And again, I'm telling this a little fast, but I'm crapping my pants at this point. I joke about it, but I was scared. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, if they found it, would they beat me up? Would they kill me? I don't know. I didn't see plastic on the floor. So I think I'm done. And we kind of laugh a little bit. And then he grabs a piece of clothing that I'd taken off. And without giving away where stuff was at, but in that piece of clothing was a recording device. And I'm watching him just work his fingers over it and knead it, and I don't even know I do it, but if you hear the recording or watch the video, there's an audible sigh from me as I'm watching this dude go through my clothing, and you hear me just go, because I'm like doing it out loud. I don't even know. And he kind of looks right at it and doesn't find it. And I've been teaching that stuff since like 2008. And people always ask, man, what would you have done or what would you have said if he found it? So when he grabbed that piece of clothing, the first thing he said was, because he was kind of lightening up too. This is supposed to be my boy, Clothesline. He's kind of like, he's like, hey, I'm not going to find anything in here I don't want to, right? Like some naked pictures of my old lady. And we kind of giggle. So my first response, if he would have said, what is this? I would have probably said, I don't know, some naked pictures of the old lady just to try to buy some time. But the only other thing I had to say, Kyle, was, and I remember it like it was yesterday, I would have said, the gig is up. I'm an undercover FBI agent, and I can walk out of here and we can see each other in court, or all hell's going to break loose. But the issue with that would have been, on my part, it would have been a bluff. And the reason is because, to my knowledge, my cover team could never really hear me inside that clubhouse. Yeah. Because, again, we're talking like 2006 to 8, somewhere in there. Clearly technology is way better now than it was then. But they couldn't hear me. So to me, that would have been a bluff. So I'll make it out of there. This very scary moment, I'm on a complete adrenaline high. And then let's just fast forward to the end of the evening, which could have been 4 or 5 in the morning, who knows. And I'm meeting the case team to pass off at an undisclosed location to pass off my recording equipment. And what I find out is the 2 guys that were part of the case team, Sergeant Higginbottom, which everybody called Higgy, from Massachusetts State Troopers, and Detective Joe Cummings from Brockton PD, were first on shift. And something in that original interaction with Joe Dogs, they picked up. They're like, something's not right. And they had actually pulled close enough, and they heard everything. So here's 2 senior, very skilled investigators. Luckily, they've gotten to know my baseline. But again, if I played the recording for you, you're going to hear my voice is a heck of a lot higher than it is right now. You're going to hear that my throat's tight. I'm even talking through my nose because I'm panicking. And they had listened to all that, and they had suited up, vested up, and they had been in that clubhouse before, and they kind of knew that the door was heavily fortified. Their plan was to drive the minivan they were in into the cinder block wall next to the door. In other words, easier to breach the wall around the door than the door. It was a plan, right? And what I found out is they heard everything. They had radioed back to Boston, said, hey, they got Scott in the basement. They're stripping him. And of course, I'm wired to the hilt. So everybody else from Boston that's working that night is coming blue lights and siren down the highway. And I say this is kind of comical, but it's just my sense of humor. But my buddy, who was the case agent, Tim Quinn, he told me, he's like, man, when I was coming down that highway and those blue lights and sirens, he goes, I felt like I was in there with you. And I looked at him and I said, I looked at him and I went, you weren't. You weren't, man. I'm like, I was looking for any friendly face that I could find in that gum dark hole. But here's one for the faith base, right?
Yeah.
At that time, I wasn't a newlywed, but we were young in our marriage, me and my wife. We had 2 daughters. My youngest daughter maybe been like 1 at that time. I don't know. So it's common now. Everybody knows usually what a burner phone is. But in other words, you go buy a phone, you pay by the minute. It has nothing attached to it. So I bought one so that my wife would have a phone that I could call her from my undercover phone on, right? Because it's operational security. You don't want any of your undercover stuff contacting anything law enforcement or real life stuff. So every night, no matter what time it was, 5 a.m, 7 a.m, I would call her and say, hey, I'm done. I'm on my way back to the hotel. I'm just going to go to sleep. I'll call you when I get up. Sometimes we talk for a little bit. Most of the time it's like, I love you. I'll talk to you later. Bye. That night, Kyle, when I called her, the first thing she said was, are you okay? And I said, yeah, why? And she said, I don't know. She said, honey, at such and such time this night, I was driving around with the girls in McAllen, Texas, and she said, I got this overwhelming feeling. And I pulled over on the side of the road and started praying. She started praying for me. And I mashed it up. And when she got that feeling and she pulled over to pray for me, I was in the basement getting stripped at gunpoint.
Scott, well, first of all, as I was reading it in the book, my palms got sweaty, and hearing you retell it right now, my palms have gotten a little bit clammy and sweaty as well. But the number of times I've heard stories like that, where someone in the middle of the night wakes up and they just immediately get this overwhelming sense they need to pray for somebody, and like they're absolutely in it in those moments. It's absolutely incredible. I do want to kind of go a little bit deeper on the faith element, because there is some confusion for people that haven't really thought through this very much. It's like, wait, how can you be a Christian and your entire job be lying all day, every day? But then you ask the same person, like, if you were a German hiding Jews under your floorboards in your house, would you tell the Nazi officer or the SS officer, yes, I'm hiding Jews under the floor? Of course you wouldn't, because the ethic of protecting human life, image bearers of God, is above those other ethics in that moment, right?
Yeah.
But again, you are betraying people. You are doing things that are abiblical, things that are outside of the Bible, and you're also trying to maintain faith. And we don't have time to get into it, but you crashed at one point, like you said. Most people would just call it like burnout. You absolutely burned completely out. You do talk about this faith-based community that you always had. You always had kind of this small group community. Again, guys, that's why it's so important to cultivate those relationships, because you got to make those deposits, because you never know when you're going to need to take some withdrawals. But how does somebody seek Christ and commune with the God creator, the creator God of the universe, while doing this type of work, which doesn't just change your personality and your clothing? It could almost feel like it can change you on a soul level. You know what I mean?
Definitely. I mean, think of the law enforcement officers that work crimes against children and have to look at those pictures and videos every day.
I've talked to some of those guys, and they're like, and I ask them, I'm like, how long do guys make it? And they're like, usually they make it about 6 months. And I was talking to a guy that was in like year 4 or 5, and it's just, I don't want to be dramatic here or play with this, but you look in their eyes and it's just like something's missing. It's just like they've just been crushed all day long, because their job is to watch videos of men raping children so that they could get some sort of an intel so that they can find the perpetrator. I mean, it's just absolutely stunning.
Yeah, it's pretty sick. A couple of things of what you ask. First of all, if I was a strict Southern Baptist, straightforward, walking the chalk line, I would have never been able to infiltrate these groups. There's no way.
Yeah.
I mean, they would have, first of all, I would have never even been in that bar, right? When I love the fact that you said burnout. I should have called it that, actually. But I got to a point after a 3-year period of my life, I did way too much. I stopped taking care of myself, and I met my threshold. For that time of the year, that day, whatever, that 3-year period, I met my threshold, and I was burned out. And I had a panic attack. I was having all kinds of issues. I'd gotten so stressed that I didn't even realize I was only breathing in my chest. Like, I rarely filled my stomach up with air. All my breath was like right here, which is not good. But when I got humbled and I got smacked down, I believe, and there's story after story throughout the Bible. You get put in some rough situations. The Lord puts you there to maybe make you come closer to Him, to maybe make you realize certain things. And I'll tell you what I wrestled with. I started seeing a counselor, a Christian counselor. I kept a journal. I was trying to figure out what it was. Again, I'm very transparent. And I was like, here's the truth. Here's what I'm feeling. Am I crazy? Am I losing my mind? Am I having a daggum nervous breakdown? I want to know. You guys have the tools in your box. Fix me or tell me what's wrong. But I remember praying a lot. And I was really wrestling with the fact of how I was going to get back to being me, or kind of who I was, and remain humble to God. And I was really wrestling with it because, man, I was beat down. I mean, I was like beat down. And it turned out I had some PTSD from something that happened earlier in my life, and as most everybody does, right? But I just remember praying about it and wrestling with it and saying, man, I may never get back, you know? And then one day while I was in conversation with the Lord, it hit me like a brick in the face. And it was this: I would have never been able to do the things I had done if He didn't bless me with what He had blessed me with. I would have never even been there. I wouldn't have the skills that I have. And I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to see a picture. He put me here to glorify Him, to get closer to Him. And I can get back to being maybe if undercover is in His plan for me, I'll be back doing more undercovers. I'll be back being a great case agent, putting bad people in jail, SWAT tactics, you name it. And it really, really helped me. But again, you mentioned small groups, and I can't tell you, when we were in McAllen, me and my wife were officially baptized as adults by our own choice, right? And we had a great small group. We called them life groups down there. But man, and even when I got to Tennessee, same thing. I've been in some things, and it's just something so powerful. For non-believers, they're not going to get it, you know, but to sit in a chair, and even it's embarrassing at first. You're like, oh man, no, I'm playing big league. I'm a tough guy. I don't need people to put their hands on me and pray for me. That's bull. You need it. And to be sitting in a chair in the middle of a room and your small group come and lay hands on you and pray over you. I'm telling you, Kyle, when I get up, I could do that. I mean, I'm telling my age, but I could do the old Kool-Aid guy. I'll run right through a wall, you know?
Well, I think you're hitting on something that a lot of guys, again, we get this idea that the lone wolf thing is like the thing we should be looking for, but it's like, hey, watch a nature show. What happens to lone wolves? They die alone. Like they get put out, even if they used to be the alpha, they get put out of the pack and they die by themselves. They either get, taken out by another animal, or they starve to death or freeze to death. Okay. Mm-hmm. Does that sound like fun? Does that sound like something that you need to do? But here's the other thing, Scott. You're talking about, all good things come from the Lord. We see that throughout Scripture. But I've been put on this planet to equip men to push back darkness, okay? So I have had to expose myself to some incredibly dark areas of humanity so that I could help guys recognize darkness when they see it so that they can push it back. Mm-hmm. You can't push back darkness just by randomly pushing your palms out in the ether. You have to have a specific thing that you are pushing back. And so what that requires of some people is exposing themselves to those things, and you can't get through that and keep your soul and maintain your faith unless God has equipped you to do that, right? So I'm not saying that people should do and expose themselves to the things that I expose myself to, but I've been given a mandate, right? But if God gives you a mandate, he gives you the ability to walk through that mandate. He will give you the strength. Like, that's the whole game. He's not going to give you a mandate and give you no ability to accomplish it. Right. And so I think that's where a lot of guys miss it. And so, speaking of darkness, obviously kind of the crux of the entire book, because it is the subtitle, is How I Went Undercover to Expose America's Nazis. Okay, so Nazis, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, accelerationists, that's a really a through point of what we're seeing here. But I do have to read literally the funniest quote of the entire book, because as I'm sitting here on the floor of my studio where I do most of my prep reading books, I literally laughed out loud. Okay, so I got to read this quote here. In the pitch black darkness, I walked back to my car to get my gear so I could finally start playing, because you were about to, play guitar at this event. I went through what had just happened, starting to worry about the bureaucracy and questions I may get asked. Did I have the right approvals for that ceremony? What had just happened? Then it hit me. I think I just joined the damn Klan. Yep. I just joined the Klan. And so here you are having this realization all at once as you're walking to your vehicle. Holy crap, I just joined the KKK. And I just start busting out laughing, because you would think okay, you would know what you just done. But we've all had that moment where we're like, wait a minute. Did I just do the thing that I absolutely clearly just did? Holy crap, I just did. But it's like the end of the whip where it just doesn't hit you until the very, very end. Now, you obviously spend some time in the book speaking on the KKK. I do want to spend a little bit more time talking about Accelerationists. Yeah. But you got to tell us about how you got into the KKK. I mean, come on, Scott.
Well, oddly enough, this section of the KKK had a hotline. I mean...
Like what? I know this was years ago, but it's like they literally had a 1-800 number. Hey, call this number if you want to join the Klan.
Yeah, it's not that long ago. Yeah, you call and old John Jack answers the phone, and it turns out John Jack ended up being the CLUD, which is basically the chaplain for the Klan. I mean, they got their own Bible, man, the Cloran. But it's if you're in the Klan, every phonetic sound that's a K is now a K. It doesn't matter. I would spell my name Scott with SKOTT, there was a case team that was already investigating the Klan in Alabama, and I called the hotline, and I'm talking to them, and I had a backstory that was believable, and I vetted it as you should. I mean, I don't need to bluff anything, but long and short of it is, I'm like, man, I'm an old biker. There was this rally. I don't know about. I've never been to one. You guys was it I mean, is there like bars? Is there booths? Is there merchandise? Dancing, music? And he said to me, he goes, well, now Scott, I ain't gonna lie to you. I had a band lined up. He said, but the singer just got locked up and put in jail. I don't know what the hell I'm gonna do. And I said, really? Did I mention that I'm a singer and a guitar player and a musician? And he's like, no. And I said, well, let me do this. I said, how about I just bring my acoustic, my PA system, and if I get there, you can come out by my car, I'll strum a couple of tunes. If you think I suck, no harm, no foul, we'll put it back in the back of the car, and, it'd be a day. He said, oh, man, it's going to be awesome. So I ended up playing music. But some of the funny things on that one, I just remember being there, and I learned there's a lot of history in the Klan, and you have to study it to get to join the Klan. You get naturalized, but then you've got to take a K Uno test, a K Duo test. And anyway, I passed those tests, but it's a lot of history there. But one of the things was they had like this 30-foot cross. It was steel, and you wrap it in burlap, and then you put steel twine or whatever around it to hold the burlap, soak it in diesel fuel, which they call Klan cologne, because there's really no way to stand that cross up without it getting on you. So they call it Klan cologne. And I remember asking the CLUD, I said, hey, is there going to be a cross burning tonight? And he's like, now, Scott, it's not a cross burning. That'd be sacrilegious. And I'm like, oh. And he goes, it's a cross lighting. He said, it signifies the light of Jesus Christ coming down into the world and driving the darkness out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay. So Jesus was just a white guy. I got it. All right,
of course,
we're cool.
Not a Middle Eastern Jew. That wouldn't make any sense.
Nope. No way at all, man. So yeah, that case kind of went awry. A source and a case agent kind of crapped the bed, and nothing ever happened. But I did play 2 rallies there, out in the middle of a field, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Alabama.
And Scott, how many people have that on their resume? I mean, I think you should put that on a business card, man. Former Klan concert guy, dude. Yeah, I think that kind of works out for you. But where you really, so that kind of, whetted your appetite for that whole thing, the white supremacy side. But there's another thing that I want you to get into, because I do want to talk about accelerationists, how they're different. Because when people think about white supremacy, they normally think about dorks in robes, lighting up crosses, as it were. But I want to read this quote from the book. In 23 years, I was at this point, at 23 years undercover work that I have done, I've never had to burn Bibles or set fire to an American flag. I've damn sure never been with a group of people who stole a goat and sacrificed it at a pagan ritual, then drank its blood. I did all that in just 3 days with the base. And so a lot of people are not going to be very familiar with the base, but I think the base could be one of those groups that could be in the accelerationist category. And so accelerationists should not be seen in the same way as racial separatists or white supremacists or people that just think, black people aren't technically human beings, or, we shouldn't integrate the schools and any of that stuff that people think about when they think of the KKK. So how about we start with you telling us what exactly is an accelerationist group right now, and then let's go into talking a little bit more about the base.
Okay. So this is what I learned going into these groups. An accelerationist is essentially this. They don't believe that there's a political solution to save the white race. They believe that society is going to collapse either on its own or from man-made events, and they want to speed it up, hence accelerate. Right. There is a book called Siege that was written by James Mason, longtime white supremacist. He created Atomwaffen, and that was kind of like the main accelerationist group. And then the base comes around. The base was kind of like an umbrella group. So pretty much anybody that I met in the base was also a member of some other white supremacist neo-Nazi group. And there was actually members of Atomwaffen that were in the base as well. So if you hear siege culture, siege mentality, it's all like that book, which is basically a bunch of articles that he put together. But I mean, they get to more of in the accelerationist view, they're looking at more guerrilla warfare. In other words, they don't care about doing the Charlottesville, standing out there with signs and screaming racial slurs. And they say that does no good. You're doing nothing. Plus, you're making yourself an easy target. We want to do things like poison water systems, take down power grids, derail trains, murder, stuff like that. In the accelerationist group, the base that I infiltrated, pretty much everybody was pagan. There's a long line of white supremacy that they call it Christian identity, not to confuse being a Christ follower. They call it Christian identity, and that was back in the Reverend Butler, Red Ray Fair, Aryan Nation days. They take that and they take the story of the Garden of Eden, and it's kind of the same story. It's still Adam and Eve. It's still Cain and Abel. It's still a serpent. It's still fruit of the forbidden tree, except the fruit of the forbidden tree is now a sexual act with the serpent, which was a man of color, aka Satan. And they say that the offspring of the sexual contact or sexual intercourse with the demon, Satan the offspring was Cain. And that is what they call the mud race all the way down. But the offspring between Adam and Eve was Abel, and that's the pure white race. So that's a heck of a twist. But you start seeing a lot more paganism. So, you get like Norse mythology or whatever. So you see that. But I mean, you saw that with Hitler too. He was big in the Norse mythology. But I will tell you this: at least within the last couple of years, I don't have my finger right on the pulse in this last year so much, but the accelerationist groups, if you scratch the surface enough and you start looking, somewhere you're probably going to find in that group that there's a member of Order of Nine Angles or some other groups like that, which are heavily satanic white supremacy groups. I mean, they post some horrific stuff on these dark web kind of apps. And I mean, it's like child mutilation, stuff like that, a lot of rape, things like that. But that's what we kind of found when I got in the base.
And so the interesting thing about that is I feel like there was around the time that Antifa and Black Lives Matter was destroying the country back in 2020 after George Floyd died in police custody. $2 billion worth of damage. People were killed. Like police precincts were taken over. All these different things. It seemed like the media and the political narrative at the time, because obviously the Biden administration was in power, was that, okay, it's not, we don't have to worry about these people. We need to worry about domestic terrorism coming specifically from white supremacists. And they loved using the example of Dylan Roof, who you talk about in the book, who is basically worshipped by a lot of these groups. Mm-hmm. But I got to say, from someone who doesn't do this all day, every day, it seemed like that threat was basically like a distraction. Like, hey, look over here. Not to say that it doesn't exist, but to pretend like, hey, there's literally a building on fire over here right now, but you want me to worry about some guys that are gathering, in the bushes, passing around these different stories. And then there's the obvious things where there were like clearly feds that were showing up and doing these, we're going to hold flags and walk down to the National Mall and things like that. And then all of a sudden Kash Patel takes over the FBI and these groups just don't exist anymore. And so there's a lot of like, I know we're getting to some, itchy territory for a lot of people, because there's a lot of people that are like, wait, I don't think we're focusing on the right things, but these groups do exist, but they're obviously not flying planes into buildings. So kind of help me unravel this a little bit, because just being a civvy, I'm just like, I'm not really worried about these dorks doing things and getting into the water supply. Not saying that we shouldn't watch them and shouldn't pay attention and shouldn't infiltrate, try to stop them, but I just don't know that it's the threat that I should be worried about, if that makes sense.
Sure. Man, we could we could spend hours.
I know. We're winding to a close here, and I just cracked open the can. Yeah,
we could spend hours on it. You make a very good point. And from the inside, by the end of my career, I was like the domestic terrorism guy in East Tennessee. But I was also the undercover coordinator. We were running undercover ops, and they were all kind of bouncing off of domestic terrorism. So that's what we saw. You can also tie that to why I started working that stuff. I mean, we kind of were moving away from biker gang stuff, and it was really becoming more prominent to see this domestic terrorism threat, and my skill set fit there. You make a very good point, though, that when all those buildings were being set on fire and police departments and courthouses might have been taken over and whatnot, what were we doing law enforcement wise? I can tell you from personal experience that I come back as a case agent. I go, hey, I tell my boss at the time, I'm like, hey, I just left, this county. I'm sitting down with him. I said, I might have a Black Lives Matter case, and my boss, I remember him going, ooh, and I go, ooh, and he goes, yeah, headquarters really looks at those really closely. I said, as they should every case. I said, I don't care what. I'm colorblind, man. If you're breaking the law, I mean, if you just came in and reported it, I'm like, hey, let's work this. So you got a good argument there. But for me, my skill set led me to these things. Now, to counter some of the stuff that you said you see and you were thinking, these groups are there. And we do need to worry about them, because that's what always happens, right? Look back at the gang phenomenon when it started really growing in the 80s, like that kind of street gang thing. You'd have somebody show up. It happened in my county, and I was one of the idiots too. It was like, hey, the Crips. I go, boy, you need to go back to California. There ain't no Crips in South Carolina. Well, guess what? About 2 months later, Crips everywhere, because there was one and they started a whole new thing. This was coming on our radar, because you got to remember well, I say you got to remember, as if there's a lot of people out there that do not know the darkness that is on this planet. And so there's like Discord, 4chan, 8chan, 12chan, Threema, Riot, anything like that. And a lot of these people that are up to nefarious things, wanting to do bad acts. I'm not saying that everybody on there is that way, but there are groups like Whites Only, 14 Words, and you get into these Telegram chats and Tearaway, all this other stuff, and it's just white supremacy. And again, from a law enforcement side, we're sitting there and you're looking at thousands upon thousands of, just some of the most crude, evil things you can say about somebody that's not white, and or that are not Anglo. I mean, they cannot stand the Jewish people, But out of all of those in America, we have a constitution. You have First Amendment freedom of speech. You can walk out in the street and say, I hate all, insert whatever racial slur you want. You can say, I hope all, insert racial slur, die. That's not illegal. But how do we know which one of those thousands, if any, are planning to do something really bad? And
Right.
that's how the base came on our radar. And because there were some people that were spewing some crazy stuff. Our world working partners like UK, Australia, they were seeing members of the base and they were like, hey, it looks like this is kind of coming out of the United States. And we all started working it.
Well, and you talk about in the book, there were some people that y'all caught that when y'all caught them, they were like, oh, I'm so glad y'all caught me, because it was almost like they were being compelled by a dark force, but let's just call it what it is, a satanic force, to do something negative, right? To do something where they take human life. And I remember growing up in Lawton, Oklahoma, kind of a rough city in southwest Oklahoma. When I was, high school, 2002, 2003, 2004, the gangs were just kind of funny. Like they would fight each other, but they weren't, doing like big stuff. But towards my senior year, I was like, wait a minute. Like, because there were a lot of different Crip sets, the Hoovers, that was really big in our town. And the gangs didn't just start fighting, they started shooting each other. And then they started like running girls and running drugs and doing a whole lot more stuff. And it all kind of happened there on the back end where it's just like, yeesh, yeah, it's all fun and games. It's all funny until it's not, until it turns in a different way. But man, we've gone everywhere in this conversation. Let's go ahead and put a bow on it. My biggest thing as I was reading your book, Scott, was what about your safety now? Because people have long memories, okay? And you put some people away for a very, very long time, but some of the people you put away are already out there. And here you are writing a book with your face on it, with your name on it, right? And you don't exactly make yourself super hard to find. And I know you're a capable guy. You understand weapon systems, you understand protection and all the different things. But what about your safety now? And I guess what does life look like now that you've been retired for a few years and now you're just trying to operate in the world?
I was going to use my stupid sense of humor and go, wait a minute, I didn't think about that.
Oh, no. Yeah, I know you thought about it.
I'm like, what? Dadgummit.
Shoot.
Take my face off the book right now. Look, probably the easiest way to explain it is this. In the criminal world, even as a cop or as a case agent, you arrest people, you put people in jail all the time. You may run into them again. That propensity for violence, what that retaliation. For me personally, my best defense is a good offense. I just go and approach it. I got to remember, I came from a local law enforcement level, and if you got threatened at a local level, the county's not going to take money out of their budget and move you to a different county. But when you get in the FBI, if you got a threat or you feel threatened, once you hit that threat button, headquarters is coming and you're going to get moved, and you don't have a choice of where you're going. Sometimes they move you and you didn't even hit the button, but they come in and move you. But in the criminal world, all these undercovers, with the exception of a couple that were classified, once I may have been arrested with you, you may not know it's me, but at some point you're going to sit down with your defense attorney and you're going to get what we call discovery, which is supposed to be everything that we have built in a case against you, including my notes, including text messages that I may have sent back and forth about a target. So they're going to be sitting with their attorney and they're going to hear the recording and they're going to know that I was the undercover. They may not have known my last name was Payne. And that's just kind of the way it is. I've bought into the threat thing once or twice and I was like, man, I may have to move. And then really it was when I was sitting at church, and I'm sitting at church and I'm like, wait a minute, this is my town. Now that they're arrested and this case is taken down, I'm overt now for that section. I'm not going back there ever again to work undercover. They all know. And essentially, I just don't live in fear. I mean, I'm not fear of the Lord, yeah, but I don't walk around on eggshells, but I don't walk around with a blind eye either. I mean, there's only one way in and out of where I live. You got to pass two of my pastors to get to me. I'm on the hill. Me personally, I'm just, it doesn't bother me that much. My wife and kids, I don't want them concerned or worried, but my wife coined this term and, man, I wish I'd have thought about it and to put in the book, or she would have thought about it to put in the book. But I always talk about undercover. We're talking undercover. You were undercover. You were undercover. And then one day she goes, yeah, but the entire time you were under his cover. And I was like, holy
Amen.
cow, man, that is unbelievable. That is absolutely right. So that's kind of, you can't live in fear. And again, especially if you're in law enforcement, I mean, you can do things. I mean, don't be stupid, but do you know how hard it is to like erase yourself? I mean, in this day and age, like when we built my home, I would have had to not have my name anywhere on it, not be anywhere on my wife's Facebook. Yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, and again, like you said earlier, I made friends with a lot of these people. These people still called me after they were arrested. Drunk dialed me. Hey, Scott, it's your boy. I know you're just doing your job. I love you, brother. And I'm like, I love you too, man. It's nothing. I mean, I don't hate you. I mean, I've told so many people that I've arrested over the years. I sit down with them. I'm like, I'm not saying I think you're a bad person. I'm not saying I disagree with what you did. I'm just saying you're an adult. You chose to break the law and you got caught. So here we are.
Well, hey, man, we've gone everywhere in this conversation. This went about as spectacularly as I thought it was going to go, but that's all for me. Is there anything else you want to get off your chest?
Oh, man.
Well, I mean, love. In the time we have allotted.
Yeah. Stop hating.
Yeah, we'll do our best.
It takes too much energy and it's not rewarding. Love, man. Love. No, just keep spreading knowledge. Keep spreading knowledge. But for this listening crowd, normally I don't get to speak quite like this, especially if I'm in a instructor for an organization. You can't preach. Sometimes I'll be getting out of a car, like we're doing tactical stuff, and I'd be crawling out of a beat up car, and I might say, "Help me, baby Jesus." I'd say, or Allah, or Satan, Odin, whatever your thing is, man.
Whoever can help me.
Yeah, I know. But for this crowd, man, I said it Monday when I talked. I said, if you don't have faith, I'm not preaching to you. But if you're doing this and you're out there on your own, you better believe in something.
All right, Scott, I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, brother.
There you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed my time with Scott Payne. But before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. At Undaunted.Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. So I've got a link to where you can pick up your copy of Codename Pale Horse, guys. It's a fantastic book. Go in the show notes and check it out. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.